Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Double Take with the Safety Bros. I'm Alex Safety, here with my brother, Johnny Boy, not Jonathan, Johanna. Safety, what is poppin', John?
Ready for the season to get back. It's just about that time. We got the draft tomorrow. I'm pumped for it.
Oh, yeah, this is a big week for the NBA. We got a lot of stuff. We got free agency starting by the end of the week. Of course, the draft is on Wednesday, and we've had a lot of fun trades that we're going to talk about. So let me give you the rundown before I introduce our special guest. It's been way too long that we've had this podcast without him coming on. But let me first give you a rundown. So today we are going to be talking about, of course, the big trades that Milwaukee made late last night in hopes to convince Giannis to sign the extension. We're going to get to the Chris Paul trade. He's going to play with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix. How good will Phoenix be? Of course, the rumors of James Harden's potential trade to Brooklyn. We're going to touch on that as well. And then, of course, we're going to talk all things NBA draft. Who should Minnesota take number one? Who are the sleepers in the draft? How high or low will LaMelo Ball go? That's going to be a fun question to see what's going to happen, how it's going to play out. And, of course, who do we want the Miami Heat to draft? This is a Miami Heat podcast, as we always say. But we have a very special guest joining us today. Without any further ado, I want to give a warm welcome to our guest hailing all the way from North Jersey. He's our official Double Take college basketball analyst and draft expert. He has his finger on the pulse of every NBA team. He knows where all the top prospects are going, and he's going to tell us exactly how the draft is going to go down. It's one of our boys, one of our best friends, and the only person who loves Dwayne Wade as much as we do. RJ Doe, Eli Mallouhi. How you doing, Eli?
What's going on, guys? Thank you guys for having me. It's been a long time overdue.
Yes.
I'm super excited. I'm an avid listener, an avid fan, and I'm definitely excited to talk about one of my favorite days of the year, the NBA draft, with mixing in some free agency stuff as well. So definitely excited. Thank you guys for having me.
Well,
Of course.
absolutely, man. We are pumped to have you, Eli.
It's long overdue, but now we get it with our draft special. So here we go.
Here we go. Yeah, so why don't we start off, Eli, before we get into all the draft stuff. This will be a little appetizer. We'll save the main dish and the dessert for later. So last night, we were actually texting about this. It seemed like it was super late. The night was winding down. I was probably getting ready to go to bed, and my phone goes off, of course, Woj bomb. I have Woj notifications on for Twitter. And of course, yeah, I got to have it. And so the Milwaukee Bucks, everyone's been talking about this offseason about how can they get better to make sure Giannis doesn't leave in 2021. And they traded Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, 3 first-round picks, and the right to swap on 2 picks for Drew Holiday. Then they also, later on that night, we got news that they were trading also for Bogdanovich, and who's from the Sacramento Kings, very young, great players. He's a good shooter. And so 2, studs, that's an upgrade from their backcourt from last year. Do you think that this, maybe puts them over the top? Will they be able to get out of the East? Was it worth it? Some people are saying they gave up too much. What do you think? What's your take on these trades, Eli?
So I think on the surface, they probably gave up a little bit too much. But I think when you really look at what Milwaukee's doing or what they're trying to do, I think that it's tough to answer whether they gave up too much. But if I had to say, I would say they didn't give up too much at all. Because, we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, but to me, what this says to me is I think Giannis is staying now. I didn't really think so too much coming into the last week or so. And it's not that I think now they're good enough and that this is what makes Giannis want to stay. I don't think it's like, oh, now Giannis is like, oh, I got Drew, now I'm staying. What I think this signals to me is that Giannis has expressed interest in staying and signing the Supermax. And because they're confident that he's staying, then they went all in and now they're making all of these moves. And Mark Stein, I think it was, tweeted earlier that he's been hearing for the last couple of weeks that Giannis is planning on staying. He just hasn't officially signed it yet or anything like that. And now there's starting to be some real talk that Giannis is going to sign his extension. And I think that this just signals to me that the Bucks are confident they're going to keep Giannis, which means now they're going all in. These first-round picks only mean something if Giannis and Drew leave. If they don't leave, then who cares?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what this is saying to me, my opinion.
Right. So my take is this: like you said, Eli, right off the bat, you're already thinking 3 first-round picks and 2 swaps. That's sounds like way too much. That sounds like what you get for a Kawhi Leonard and Anthony Davis or Russell Westbrook in a
That's
trade.
basically what the Lakers gave up for Anthony Davis.
Right.
Only they also gave up Brandon Ingram. That's the difference.
Right. It was the
That's
Anthony Davis
the
trade.
difference between Drew and AD. So.
Anthony Davis was 3 first-round picks, right? And like Brandon Ingram and Josh Hart, some of those guys. Westbrook was traded to Houston for 2 first-rounders and 2 pick swaps. Okay, so and obviously Chris Paul was in that deal as well. But just think about it like that. To give up this much of your future for Drew Holiday, a guy who hasn't been an all-star. He's been an all-star one time in his career. It was 2013, 8 seasons ago. And if Giannis leaves and Milwaukee ends up bottoming out and they don't have these picks, this trade's going to look like the Nets trading away their picks for Paul Pierce and KG, the picks that led to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So I think, Eli, you're right that either it's one of two things. Either Giannis said they're going to stay, he's going to stay, so now they're willing to throw away their picks for win-now role-player veteran guys like Drew Holiday, or they're just stupid and they threw away their future without actually Giannis affirming that he's going to stay. So I think that's another possibility we have to consider. I'm trusting the process with the Miami Heat, trusting the Godfather, and I'm not worried yet. We're going to get Giannis in a room in a year from now.
All right. I think I disagree with both of you. I kind of agree here in some places. So, Eli, I kind of agree with what you said about I don't think they gave up too much. But the reason I think they did not give up too much is because players like Giannis do not grow on trees. They struck gold with him. They picked him number 15 pick in 2013. The last time they've had a player of his caliber was literally 45 years ago when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he ended up leaving in 1975, I think, to the Lakers. They had to trade him, whatever. So when you're in a small market, you're not going to be able to attract anyone to like any free agents to come join you. And they have a transcendent talent. So in my opinion, I think you have to do anything you possibly can. I don't think they traded 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps for Drew Holiday. I think they traded all of that for the potential to keep Giannis, to maybe give Giannis a little bit more of a reason not to leave. If they did even that a little bit, if they pushed him, if they got him closer to leaving, Milwaukee, then I think it's definitely worth it. And another thing I want to talk about is just how good is Drew Holiday. I think he's definitely an upgrade from Eric Bledsoe. He's definitely a defensive stud. I think what they needed more was a better offensive player. So I don't think Drew Holiday was definitely the perfect guy that I would have wanted to see them get if I was a Milwaukee fan. But I do think it's definitely an upgrade. And when they ended up getting Bogdanovich as well, I think that made a lot more sense. Because to me, I think Drew Holiday is like basically a rich man's Eric Bledsoe. If you look at their numbers, they're very similar numbers. It's just Holiday shot more shots last season because, of course,
the way Holiday does it. Holiday's a better standstill shooter, and he's just a better passer and creator as well. And then obviously the defense. I mean, they're both beyond elite defenders.
Yeah,
I think sets them atop a little bit more is the Bogdanovich signing.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
That's another guy that can create off the dribble. He's been clutch his whole career. He's had this rep from when he was back playing overseas, from when Europe, wherever he was from. He's this clutch, just wants the ball in his hands, which is what you need next to Giannis. Can be what they also want Chris Middleton to be, but not just. So
absolutely.
I think just mixing the two of them together is exactly what Milwaukee needed.
Definitely.
I think the core is nice. However, I want to ask you guys a quick question. Let's say the team looks great, number 1 seed again. They do it a little bit differently because they don't have Bledsoe. They have these 2 guys now. Maybe Giannis is second in MVP voting. Maybe he wins a 3rd straight. That'd be crazy. First since Larry Bird. Let's say they get bounced in the playoffs again, either in the conference finals or semifinals, whatever. But it's before the NBA finals. Does Giannis stay?
No, unless he already signed the extension.
Well, Eli, so that's what I forgot to say this about what you said. You said you think that this is indicative of Giannis already giving them the heads up. Yeah, I want to stay if you guys make some moves.
Officially, before we go, just maybe not 110%. I'm signing it. Just give me a week to find the paperwork or whatever.
Well, so he can sign it.
Confident. Yeah.
Yeah, so he can sign it between now, November 17th, and December 21st, which is the day before the season starts. I think he'd be crazy to sign it, even though they made these 2 moves. Because to me, you don't lock yourself down in Milwaukee for the another 5 years of your prime. What'd you say?
unless he's just different. And I'm with you guys. Like,
Yeah, like he's like Damian Lillard maybe. Like
playing devil's advocate. I'm a Heat fan also, in case that wasn't obvious. So yeah, like I'm hoping that I'm wrong. And if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said that I was wrong. I just feel like there's been rumblings of where there's smoke, there's fire. And given that they went all in, there have been rumblings that he wants to sign it already anyway. This might have just been the final piece. Like, I hope I'm wrong. I'm mostly playing devil's advocate. Like if you put $100 on what I had to bet on, I would say he probably doesn't sign it. But I do think that there's a much, much higher chance. And it's not that this move made his decision. It's that he's made his decision, which pushed them to make these moves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. The last thing we'll say is I think any player that's that great needs to wait until the summer and be able to hear the offers.
Yep.
All right, guys, really quickly, at 6:10 p.m. on Tuesday, we got a little bit of a Shams bomb. Not really a bomb, but the Rockets and Wizards have discussed a deal centered around Russell Westbrook for John Wall.
Oh, I saw this like a week ago. Like when I was reading Russell Westbrook trades. I like that. I actually like
a little bit spicy.
Let me tell you why that's crazy for 2 seconds. So on the rundown, we were talking about what we were going to talk about. One of the topics is that it was Russell Westbrook for John Wall, and I said that's the one that made the least sense to me. So yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is just kicking the tires around, but to me that makes the least sense of all.
It's just a change. You need a change of scenery. They're both point guards. They're very athletic point guards. John Wall's coming off an injury. Russell Westbrook is on the decline. Well, maybe it's just I need a little change of scenery. Give Brad Beal a different player to play with.
I'll say this, though. Shams also said no traction yet. Rockets are seeking more assets. So the Rockets are just willing to take on John Wall's contract if they get a bunch of assets with it, of course. So,
but that doesn't make sense. It's basically
I'd rather have Westbrook, But.
As far as I know, they're relatively similar contracts. Like,
for a better player.
Yeah.
One's a better player, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, well, then let's get to another point guard who's moving even further out west, going from OKC to Phoenix. This is actually, I went back to our podcast, the last one we did, and we actually did talk about the potential for Chris Paul to go to Phoenix. And it's a move that, of course, it's not a place where we all think maybe, he'll actually be able to contend for a ring. But it does put a young team that was gunning for the playoffs last year, just missed it after going 8-0 in the bubble. It gives them an even better point guard. Devin Booker has never played with a stud point guard. Like the best guy he had played with was Ricky Rubio last year, and that was like crazy. So he's going to be able to move off ball a little bit. What do you guys think? How good? What's Phoenix's ceiling now that they have Chris Paul?
Yeah. So what I'll say about this is I think the ceiling is hosting a playoff series. So maybe they at their absolute best.
4 seed.
Absolute best in the West, 4 seed. And I'm saying this knowing what we know about the West, where the 4 seed and the 7 seed is going to be decided by literally a game probably. So the West is very tight. It's really good. I like this a lot, Alex. Like you said, I remember towards the beginning of last season, we talked about the Suns were good towards the beginning. Obviously, they ended up going 8-0 in the bubble. Mm-hmm. But they were really good, and Devin Booker was playing a lot better because he went from – I forget the statistic exactly, but he went from like 75% of his points being unassisted, so he's just creating his own shot, to like something like a lot. It was not 25%, but maybe it was like in the 30, 45, 55%. So it went down a lot. Why? Because Ricky Rubio was passing him and getting him the ball. Chris Paul is just an upgrade from that, and obviously more defensive-minded than Ricky Rubio. He is older. Hopefully he doesn't fall off a cliff, but I think what we saw from him in OKC, it's really promising. So I'm looking forward to watching. This is easily a fun League Pass team to be watching on, a random Tuesday night.
Yeah, for sure. I agree a lot of what you're saying. I just think the 4 seed is still too high. I think where you said from 4 to 7, there's going to be like one spot or whatever. I see it from 5 to 7. Both LA teams, Denver and the Warriors, assuming they don't completely fall off a cliff.
I agree with those.
Which I don't know how you guys feel about the Warriors.
Well, we can talk about the Warriors when we get into the draft stuff because obviously they have the number 2 pick, but I might push back on that a little bit.
And that's totally understandable, I guess, but I just don't see it that way. So for me, 5, 6 seed and like a tough, like pesky first round out, like like the Mavericks were this year, right? They were the 7th seed, but they were pretty good and whatever.
That's a good comp.
Yeah, so like that team where like, they're the 6th seed and they play the 3-seeded Nuggets and take them to like a hard fought 6 or something like that. I just think like that's their ceiling. But I think the big part of their ceiling is going to come down to DeAndre Ayton. Is he going to be that defensive anchor that they're going to need in order to take that step forward? I think they've got a good defensive core, it looks like, between Paul, Bridges, and then Ayton, hopefully, if he continues to improve, which he really, really did after the All-Star break this year, or like hit the All-Star break or like halfway through the year.
Yeah.
The cutoff, but you know what I mean? Like around that time,
Mm-hmm.
he improved a lot. And I think just his ability to be a defensive anchor, because like Cam Johnson's probably going to be the other starter, and Booker's a fine defender, but he's nothing special yet, at least. We'll see when he's got a better supporting cast. But I think it's going to come down to Ayton. But to me, they're going to be a fun 5 to 7 seed, and maybe they give the Clippers or something a matchup in the first round.
That would be fun. The main thing that I'm thinking of with this trade that I really like is Chris Paul is a veteran, obviously, but he's also he's like a bulldog. Everyone compares him to that. And I think when you're a young team still unproven, you need someone like that to be in your huddles, to light a fire under you. And I think there's no better player for Devin Booker to be able to develop with than Chris Paul. Okay, so our last NBA superstar trade talk. James Harden to Brooklyn. Who knows if it's happening? Does it make sense? Do we like it? Do we hate it? What are our thoughts? I can just say I hope it happens, because I think if that happens, that team will not work. And I'd love to see Kyrie and KD crash and burn, and James Harden too. So what do you guys think?
All right, so I disagree. We've had a lot of conversation about Harden over the years. A little bit this past week with some Heat rumors. Looks like that's not happening, but as we talked about it, I clearly am a much bigger Harden fan than both of you are, in terms of his skill, not in terms of my actual.
Oh, don't worry, we know what you're saying, Eli.
I clearly think he's better than you guys think he is. If I'm Brooklyn, to me, it just comes down to one simple question, and it's, can you get a top, conservatively speaking, let's say 7 player in the NBA? And the best thing you're giving up, and I love Karis LeVert, what is he, on his 50, right? 40 to 50, let's call it, player. If all you're trading is a top 40 or 50 player for a top 7 player and some picks, we're talking about right now, like, what are we talking about, guys? Like, don't overthink this.
They should do it. They should do it. I'm more
15-ish, wherever you think Kyrie is. Let's call him 15 to 20.
Yeah.
3 of the top 15 to 20 players, they're going to be unreal.
Well, here's my follow-up, Eli. Here's my follow-up. So we've seen with different big threes, we've seen the Miami big three, Chris Bosh takes a back seat. With the Cleveland big three, Kevin Love takes a back seat. With Golden State Warriors back three, Klay Thompson, a guy who's very good at playing off ball. He did get less looks than he did otherwise, and so did Steph Curry when Kevin Durant joined. So who out of those 3, who's the third best player? I would say it's Kyrie.
Yes.
You think Kyrie's taking a back seat?
You're right, Alex. And that's why I think, Eli, on paper, I'm with you. Get this top 7 guy.
On
get
2K.
Harden.
On 2K,
yes.
I'm with you.
In 2K, on paper, whatever. I love playing with –
unbelievable.
Yeah. Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant, of course. But the problem is egos. And we know that Kyrie and KD have this somewhat of an ego thing, but we know that they can play together because they're buddies. We know that Harden and KD can play together because they're also buddies. They played together, whatever it was, 8 years ago, before the Harden trade to Houston. But but Kyrie and Harden, that's what I'm worried about. Are they going to butt heads at all? Is Kyrie going to not want Harden taking some of that point guard and taking it out of his hands? Because in this situation, I think Harden's more of a point guard in terms of distributing the ball, but he also does that a lot for himself than Kyrie. Kyrie's probably more of the 2 in that situation. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. Is Kyrie going to not want to just sit on the wing or sit in a corner to hit an open 3 while, James Harden's cooking and doing his thing? I don't know. It depends on the egos, but on paper, on 2K, I think basketball-wise, it should work.
And I definitely agree that those are things that they need to consider. They're going to need to work on. Like, if they do this trade, let's call it tomorrow, if they want to throw the first-round pick in, like, they're going to have a month to figure this out before the season starts. Like, I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park, but you bet on talent.
Yeah.
KD,
I agree.
Harden, you figure all that other stuff later, and you make the move, and at the end of the day, I would be willing to bet that it works out. I don't know in what way. Like they might not, win 72 games or break the record or whatever. I know whatever the equivalent is this year with the 72 game schedule. Like they might not win 60 games and lose only 3 games to an NBA title, but it's gonna work. And the other thing is the contracts these guys are signed for. Like nobody's leaving for 3 years.
Yeah.
So
You're locked in
now, and you get this for 3 years. Maybe it takes a year. You saw the big 3 in Miami. It kind of took them a year to really develop. It took Chris Bosh's injury in the playoffs that second year when they started to go small. Like it took them a year and a half to kind of figure it out. Maybe it's the same, and then they win 3 straight titles, in 2022, 3 and 4 or something like that. Maybe, but you put this talent on the court together, and I'm willing.
Yeah. One thing I want to leave us with before we move on to the NBA draft. So when you look at each player of those 3, their last full healthy season, 2019 Durant shot 17.7 shots a game, and he had 29% usage rating. 2020 James Harden, 22.3 shots a game, 36.3 usage rating. 2019 Kyrie, 20.2 field goals a game, attempts a game, and a 29.6 usage rating. That in total, that's 60 shots a game and a 95% usage rating for 3 guys. So of course, they're gonna play differently when they're on the same team. But I just think that's definitely something that'd be really fun to look at. You go from 3 guys that nearly account for 100. If you added it up, nearly 100% of the usage rating. To what happens when you throw those guys on a team together. So that'd be really fun.
I'll be excited to watch.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and one quick nugget I just want to put out there into the world. I think this is a situation like with Kawhi. We were all talking about where could Kawhi go when he was getting traded from San Antonio. There's a favorite. Right now it's a favorite is the Nets. I think we're going to see something like a random Toronto team pop out. The way Toronto got Kawhi, I don't think this Brooklyn Nets trade will happen. But I just wanted to put that out there. I think there's going to be some underdog team that we're not even thinking about that's going to end up getting their hands on Harden.
That'd be cool. Okay, without any further ado, the NBA draft special with our draft guru Eli Mallouhi. Now, let's get to the main question we're all thinking of. This is unlike the past few years where you knew last year Zion was going 1, you knew the year before Ayton was going 1. The year before that, who was it? I can't remember. Markelle Fultz maybe. Yeah. These past few years, we kind of had an idea that the team had pretty much put it out. We want this guy. This year, that's not really the case. There's probably 3, 4, maybe 5 guys that if they went number 1, people wouldn't be super shocked. So with that all being said, Eli, I know you know exactly how it's going down on Wednesday night. You tell me, if you're Minnesota, who are you taking?
If I'm Minnesota, I'm trying to trade it.
Ooh.
First and foremost.
Okay.
But assuming that I can't trade it, or even if I do trade it, the guy that I think is going to go number 1 is LaMelo Ball.
Wow.
I think it's LaMelo Ball, and I think it's relatively a lock at this point.
Wow. Okay.
A lock?
As much of a lock as it could be without like really knowing it. Like we don't know it. And like during this year where like it feels like it's totally up in the air, I'm relatively confident it'll still be LaMelo Ball.
Wow.
And here's the biggest reason why. Before we even just go into why I like LaMelo, because I agree. That's the thing too. Like I don't necessarily agree with everything that we might think might happen, but this is one where I do agree. To me, LaMelo is the number 1 player in this class, and it's really not even that close.
Wow.
In my opinion. And it's not that I think LaMelo is this, Zion type superstar. This draft kind of stinks, like just to be honest, at the top. But I think if you were to basically, I saw a lot of people like to talk about the draft in tiers. And I think that that's exactly how teams should look at it, where like a tier 1 guy is like a Zion, an AD, a superstar. Tier 2 guy is like a guy that's probably like an all-star looking player. And then once you get into tier 3, it's like a good solid starter. There's no tier 1 guys. And I think LaMelo is the only tier 2 guy. That's the way that I look at it.
All right, so sell us. Why is he tier 2?
Okay, so the best way that I could describe why I think LaMelo is tier 2 is he's got some very serious strengths and some very serious weaknesses, right? Just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But with LaMelo, the strengths that he has are the things that you cannot teach. The weaknesses that he has are the things that you can.
Okay.
So he gave me a player, a ball player, like just forget the name, whatever, just a moldable player. What do I want him to already have before he comes into the gym? I want him to have good feel for the game. I want him to be a good passer. I want him to have good size. I want him to be a smart basketball player, and I want him to be crafty. Because those things you can't teach. No matter how you guys are basketball players, we play all the time. Like, you guys are not going to gain 3 inches the next time we play. You guys are not going to all of a sudden become infinitely better passers by practicing one-on-one all the time, right? Like, you're not going to be able to have the feel for the game. You're not going to, right? You can obviously get a little bit better experience and whatnot, but for the most part, you cannot teach those things. And those things, LaMelo, he's not just good. He is elite at every single one of those things.
All right, so
he's not great at. Let me hear.
Yeah, this is my first question. So we talk about size. I think that's something I think about when we're talking about a point guard going early. Can this guy on any given night guard Russell Westbrook? Obviously, Chris Paul's older. Chris Paul, Steph Curry. Is he going to stand across and be able to guard that's probably the deepest position in the league right now.
Yep.
So his size, he's listed at 6'7", 6'8", right? So he's very tall. But do you see him standing in front of Russell Westbrook and doing as good a job as another point guard in the league?
So my answer is no, and that's why
he's a defender,
and that's why he's a tier 2 player. If he was an elite defender, I think his offensive game is going to translate. His defense is going to be the problem, but his defense, it didn't feel like it was a problem, like technically or anything. Like, it was just like an effort thing from time to time, which, I mean, he's playing in, a foreign country where he's clearly the best player on the court. Like, it's the same thing as like it is for almost all of these top level guys, where you're like the best player your whole life and you've got to shoulder the offensive load. It's like the Bradley Beal syndrome, where he was a great defender when his team was good, and then he averages 30 a game on like 45% shooting, and now he sucks on defense.
Yeah.
Like, I think it can be worked on to the point where he can be serviceable. And I think the bigger thing is he's got size and he plays pretty big. So I think that his ideal situation is going to be playing next to a defensive 2 that can kind of take over like the tougher positions, basically like Steph, only not like in the role, not in the style.
Right.
But like where Steph, you would say the same thing, but because he's such a good offensive player, you're not afraid dumping him on somebody and then having Clay kind of take over. If LaMelo can be put in that same situation where he can play with, let's say, a Drew Holiday, we just talked about him, and Drew can guard the 1, and you can kind of hide LaMelo a little bit, he's got the size that I think he can make up for it.
So, well, here's my I have 2 questions about LaMelo, and we haven't really spoken about either of these yet. I think his jump shot is broken. I think we saw this with Lonzo. He has the weird thing where I think it's different than Lonzo, but he kind of starts the shot very low.
But it doesn't look that bad. It doesn't look as bad.
He's going to have to change it. It's not going to change it because Lonzo was making threes at UCLA, and he comes to the league, and it's like, all right, well, you have to fix this. And he has fixed it. So, like you said, his weaknesses are things you can work on. So that just gives me, like, that scares me, especially after, like, the whole Markelle Fultz thing. I don't like when the guy's jump shot's weird and he's already been playing basketball for 18 years or whatever.
I agree.
That's one. Do you want to say something, John?
Well, I would say I agree because if he doesn't develop his shot, which like you said, Eli, like that's one of his weaknesses, you can develop that more. If he doesn't develop a shot, his ceiling is Sean Livingston, right? I mean, or that's Jason Kidd.
Remember that point.
Okay.
All right. And the other thing I'm worried about is off the court. Like, I know the ball thing, the big ball brand has kind of died down. We don't hear about LeVar Ball as much anymore for whatever reason. But I don't know, something about it, and he's still young, of course. He's still maturing. But, I mean, this kid, he was maybe 15 or 14 or whatever when his brother was getting all the hype. And then there was the game where he, like, was pulling up from half court. And I don't think he dropped, like, 90 points or something crazy. So it's like he's just been under the public spotlight. And I don't know. And I don't know if he's, like, super mature yet that you'd want these guys to be, especially if you're taking the guy number 1. And then, of course, the other question, if it's Minnesota, can he play next to D'Angelo Russell? So all that will be seen. But you also said maybe they'll trade it. That would be interesting to see as well.
That's the thing about why I think he's still going number 1 is because at the end of the day, I think that and again, I'm not Woj. I don't know for sure.
No, you do. No, you do.
No, I know everything. That's not what I meant to say. But at the end of the day, I think that more teams, like if you were to tell me all 30 GMs are in my basement right now talking to me, hanging out with me, like I would say that most of them would have LaMelo as the guy with the highest ceiling in the draft.
Interesting.
Just That's just my opinion.
Cool.
That's what,
No, yeah, that's not. I don't think that's a hot take. We're talking about ceiling, sure,
yeah. And
but
if
it's like a hit or miss almost. I think.
that's the case, especially in a pretty weak draft
Yeah.
where, you can sell me on a ceiling more than you can sell me on a guy like Zion, right? Like he's
Mhm.
got both, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, the teams that are picking this high, they're going to look to want to pick the guy that has the highest trade value. So that, because especially in this weird draft, we'll talk about Golden State in a second, but the top two teams want to win now.
Yeah.
So if someone, can be jarred loose in a couple of weeks, trade deadline, next year, whatever it is, you want the guy with the highest trade value.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's LaMelo. He might
Fair.
not be perfectly against D'Angelo, right next to D'Angelo. I just said he needs to be next to a defensive point guard.
Yeah.
Minnesota's going to leak points.
Yeah.
Or your fantasy players against Minnesota this year.
Right.
They're going to be really, really good on offense. They're going to be really fun to watch. And they're going to have a lot of pieces where if they need to make moves later, they can. If they need to trade D'Lo, they can. If they need to trade LaMelo, they can. And I think that's why at the end of the day, I think LaMelo is going to go number one.
I think, that's the only way you sell me on it is that they get LaMelo to trade him because I do not see a backcourt of Russell and LaMelo just working out long term.
Let me ask you then. I feel like I know what the answer is about to be because it's the only other one that makes logical sense. But if you're not taking LaMelo number one from Minnesota, who are you?
It's gotta be Edwards, and I think it is a fit thing. And Eli, if they trade it, then I'm cool with that. Honestly, it's like because I don't think like when they got the first pick in this draft, I was like, I mean, it's cool. You'd want it the first rather than like the fifth, but at the same time, I wasn't super excited about any of these prospects, especially with the way they fit with Minnesota. Minnesota, you got D'Angelo Russell, you got Karl Anthony Towns. Who's gonna be the other guy? That's why I would probably take Anthony Edwards, who he's an interesting guy too, just because he has. I think he's more about the ceiling. It's like you think maybe he can work on some things. He's not like gonna come in the league and be like a stud immediately.
Yeah. So I agree. If you're just talking about fit, I agree. Anthony Edwards, the player that he could be, is probably the best fit there. But you're talking about the number one overall pick, and when you're talking about the number one overall pick,
okay,
about it all the time. You do not.
Anthony Bennett was taken number one overall.
Yeah,
that was.
So Eli, you're subscribing to just take the best regardless of position because I remember seeing three drafts in a row. We saw the Sixers take Joel Embiid, Nerlens Noel, and Jahlil Okafor. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? It's just that was the best guy they had to take, so they took the most talented guy. I think that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah, and that didn't work out perfectly because the two of those players just aren't that good.
Yeah, they just weren't good. Right. That's right.
And like, would Joel Embiid look great next to what we thought Nerlens Noel could have been? Yeah, I mean, sure. And I didn't like Jahlil Okafor in the first place, so that's just not liking what the Sixers did anyway.
Okay, so let's run down, Eli.
I don't think Edwards is that good. That's my
Well, if you don't think Edwards is that good, then why don't we run down the next? Let's do your top 10 picks of in this draft. Who you got going number 2 then to the Golden State Warriors?
So real quick, I just go back to your last point though. Well, when I was thinking about who does LaMelo remind me of, what I see the most is Sean Livingston, which is I don't see it. And maybe it's I'm focusing a little more on the post-injury Sean Livingston because I was old enough. I mean, I am older than you guys. I'm old enough to remember him like when he was younger still, but like it didn't last.
A little older than us.
It didn't last that long because he got hurt. But I just feel like he's a little like LaMelo's a little more explosive and crafty. But I see where it's coming from. The comp that I like the most, and this doesn't help my point for his ceiling because I don't think this guy's got like a crazy high ceiling, but I think he plays like a higher ceiling, like Spencer Dinwiddie, like in that kind of role.
Okay,
like
I see
big,
that.
Crafty, like just gets the job done, like high IQ, like just really, really good basketball player. I think he's got a higher ceiling. I think he's a better version.
Yeah.
But I think he'll play similar to Spencer Dinwiddie.
I like that. I like the Dinwiddie.
Point guard who can score and pass and like do that kind of stuff. And again, he's a tier 2 guy. Like, would it like a little better version of Spencer Dinwiddie? I think he'd make an all-star team. That's why I put him at a tier 2 guy. So that's my LaMelo player.
All right. Well, let's go through the next few picks. Who you got number 2?
So number 2 with Golden State, I think it's going to be James Wiseman. It's the one that we've heard the most buzz about. It's the one that makes the most sense. He's a rim-running big man. They need somebody that can play right now because they need to win right now. And if you look at this team, like, this is the one exception where I think like you have to look at what they can do right now. So
Mm-hmm.
it might matter because they want to win a title this year. But I think this is a good mix of a guy that can win right now, but also still have the high ceiling. To me, James Wiseman is DeAndre Jordan. That's that's a comp that I've been seeing, and it's a comp that I like. It's DeAndre Jordan, but the thing with Wiseman is I think he's got a little bit higher of a ceiling because I think he can develop more of a face-up game. Like, I think his bare bones is going to be a rim-running, athletic, defensive big that, you know, can play like DeAndre Jordan did on those Clippers years with Chris Paul as his Steph Curry, right? The big major difference is I think Wiseman has the potential to also have like a, you know, Chris Bosh pre-Miami, like face-up, mid-range kind of game, you know, drive to the bucket on like a, you know, triple threat position on the elbow kind of thing. I think Wiseman has that potential. He doesn't have that yet, but I think he's got that potential. And that's where I think if you add that type of player to this Golden State team, I think James Wiseman is the pick.
Yeah, that's the pick I think I like the most of some of these top ones that I've been seeing in a lot of mock drafts. Something Zach Lowe said it a few times on his draft pre-draft pods is it's rare that you have the opportunity when you're, you know, a dynasty to draft the successor, right? So we saw the David Robinson Spurs were able to draft a Tim Duncan. You know, we saw actually again with the Spurs, the Duncan Spurs were able to draft a Kawhi who unfortunately did leave. But let's say Kawhi stays for his whole career. That's a pretty seamless transition from the Duncan, Tony, Parker, Ginobili years to a Kawhi, you know, dynasty. So I think that this is another opportunity like that. They got the Steph Clay Splash Bro dynasty, and you're right. He has a high ceiling, but at the same time, he's going to be a starting center right off the bat. He's going to be in that Clint Capella, DeAndre Jordan role. So I would this is a fun pick, I think.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. It's pretty clear. I think I really like this pick, and I think this is the only guy that if I was a Golden State fan or if I was Golden State, I would really want on my team. I don't think any of these other guys would make sense because most of these guys up here are a lot of the perimeter players. Like I would think, you know, it'd be like I don't think they would want LaMelo. Wouldn't think they would want Anthony Edwards.
That is where I disagree. I think they would love to have LaMelo. I don't know who they would rather have. Like I think that this.
How does that fit though? You got that's now you got three guys. Is Klay Thompson now guarding every single opposing small forward?
I think that the way that they're going to look at it is if they can get LaMelo. I'm not saying they will. Like I think the only other guy, like I think for them it's one of these two, and like if Wiseman somehow goes one, like you're not going to take Onyeka Okongwu, who's probably the next big. You'll hear about him in a second. But like I think you take the best player, you figure out the fit, you try and trade it if you can.
Yeah, they'd have to trade then, I think.
You know, if he doesn't, then LaMelo is a supercharged sixth man for a year or so, and then you know he becomes, like you said, the successor. Where because and this is just because I'm so high on LaMelo, which we just talked about. Like if you tell me 3 years from now, like Steph starts to, you know, fall off a little bit or something like that, and LaMelo you're just taking over for the next 10 years of Golden State basketball, sign me up.
But you're still not banking off that, I guess,
Yeah,
which is why, you'd preferably want a big man.
There's no perfect answer.
Yeah. And quickly, I wanted to throw out my point about the Warriors because talking about how well I think their season can be. I don't know what we're going to get from Klay Thompson, who hasn't played in nearly, what has it been now? Like
over a year.
Summer of 2019, a year and a half. I don't know what we're getting from him. Steph even only played it was like 6 games last year. Okay, so now we're putting this back together. I think this is easily the twilight of that dynasty, no doubt. We're not going to see them, you know, I don't think we're going to see a 37-point quarter from Klay Thompson. I don't think we're obviously not going to see them win. We're not going to see them win 73 games. We're not even going to see them win 67, I don't think. I think this is more comparable.
They're going to be the 1 seed.
I know.
They're the top 4. You're going to tell me that you don't see this.
But
they're definitely top 4. I wouldn't be surprised if they were 2 or 3 either.
I would be.
I just wouldn't bet they'd be 1.
We're talking about the one team that we're differing on in this sense, like more or less, is like the teams in the Phoenix Suns range. You're going to tell me the Phoenix Suns who didn't make the playoffs, they got Chris Paul and now they're better than the Warriors?
Well, obviously the Rockets are gone now. OKC's gone. They were in that range. I think
Portland,
Utah, Dallas.
Those are the teams. Damian Lillard, TJ McCollum are going to be, if they're healthy, like everyone said this when they were the 8 seed going up against LA. They were in reality a 4 or 5 seed that was injured. So I think they're in the mix with Golden State. I also love Luka Doncic coming back after his breakout season in the bubble.
He's missing basketball, and he's been banged up his whole career, and they're going to load manage him. We're also talking about regular season. So I think the Mavericks are going to be the team that I was higher on them coming into the playoffs. I know I talked to both of you, and I said they were my like sleeper team.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite for this regular season. I think their
Okay.
future is so bright, but I think that
Well, no Kristaps hurts, you know.
they're a piece away. People are going to look at them a little bit too highly, and I think the regular season, it's going to be a lot of a lot of Luka, and a bunch of like figuring it out because they're going to play on short schedules, back to backs. Kristaps is banged up. I think they're going to be a not as great regular season team.
Okay, I'll give you that. So they have a deal to make for sure, I think, to fix it up. But the last thing I'll say is I just think that we can't be too confident in the Warriors as like the lock at number 4, I guess. I'd be honestly, if you were like, oh, Portland's more of a lock in my opinion, I'd definitely say Denver because what we saw from Denver, from Jamal Murray, from Jokic, we know they're there. We know there's some LA teams are there. But
LA teams and then Golden State.
Yeah, I think that Golden State's not as much of I think they're more in the mix, but all right, so next, the number 3 pick, Eli, Charlotte Hornets.
So number 3, and I think this is the kind of surprise, but we're starting to hear a little bit rumbles. I think Charlotte here is going to do everything against what I just said about just taking the best player, unless it's on my board because I actually love this guy. I think it's Onyeka Okongwu, the USC big man.
Okay.
What are the player comps?
Yeah, so
what are you working with?
We just talked about James Wiseman as a big man. How is this guy different?
So they're kind of opposite players to an extent. Wiseman is a little more of an offensive like athlete where like you can see the offensive ceiling. Okongwu, I don't think has the offensive ceiling necessarily, but I think that he's got unbelievable defensive IQ. The comp that everybody seems to have for him, and it's the one that we're gonna love. It's Bam.
Hey, you know what? No, there's only one Bam. I don't like that.
Bam is one of one.
One of one, baby.
So I disagree. I don't necessarily see Bam. I kind of see the idea of this like defensively versatile, kind of on the smaller like center, 6'9", like he's not this like behemoth 7-footer, but like a freak defensive guy, really good athlete. You know, that's like so I kind of see that. But I just don't feel like he has the offense. He's not a good passer, or he's not as good of a passer. Not that anyone ever is. It's Bam and Jokic, and that's it.
Yeah.
But he's like not the greatest passer. He's got a little bit of a jumper, but like nothing too special. He's just not this like fluid offensive player. So I kind of see him a little bit more like a slightly bigger like Brandon Clark, like a super.
Oh, okay. So more. But Brandon Clark is he a good defender? Isn't he more of an offensive? Oh, he is.
No, Brandon Clark's a good defender. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't really watch that much. Brandon Clark.
So Brandon Clark is a really good defender. I mean, he's a good player just in general. Brandon Clark's awesome. I think he was all rookie.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was.
So like we're talking about a really, really good basketball player, and that's why I really like Okongwu. And I think that's kind of the role that I see him in, like but a little bit bigger. So like where Clark is kind of like a 3-4 hybrid, I would say that Okongwu is more of like a 4-5 hybrid. So like a little bit bigger version, but like a defensive guy that's just versatile, does a little bit of everything. And then on offense is athletic enough and smart enough that like he's not going to drop 20 in like 20 a game all that often, but you know, he can just like be a glue guy and like a rim runner, a offensive rebounder and that kind of stuff. So I think that's the role that Okongwu plays. And I think Charlotte just needs a big man.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And because earlier there were rumors that they wanted to trade up for Wiseman, and they have Terry Rozier. They're paying him a ton of money, and they have Devontae Graham, who was a stud last season, a huge most improved player candidate. And then they have PJ Washington, who's also he's like a 4 as well. So you can get a big man next to him. So that'll be a nice look for them. Number 4th pick, then I guess it has to be our guy that I think is going number 1, Anthony Edwards at number 4 to the Bulls, right?
Yes.
All right. What do you think about Anthony Edwards then, Eli?
So I'm low on Anthony Edwards. So I see his player comp as so he's one where I think like his floor is really low and his ceiling is really high. So his ceiling I think is like a Victor Oladipo type, like he's a little bit bigger, like stockier.
Yeah.
Like 6'3", 6'4".
Very strong.
Edwards
is 225.
Yeah, Edwards is like 225. Oladipo's probably more in like the 210, 215 range. So he's definitely a little bit like stronger. But like a guy that if it all clicks is a good defender and like a smart offensive player. But where I see his floor, which is where I think he's going to be closer to, is a guy that's near and dear to our hearts, sort of. it's Dion Waiters.
I knew you were gonna say Dion.
I like that. But so that makes a lot of sense because I've been reading about him.
I guess
and
just where you think he's gonna fall in that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And so something that I read about him is that he takes a lot of jumpers, even though he's not a great jump shooter. He's a guy you'd just like, if you're not like, why are you not going to the basket every time? Like, just go to the basket. And one of our
28% from three on like 6 threes. Like, what are you?
Yeah, what are you doing? What are you doing? So our friend Peter Karras, who's from Minnesota, he said, "Who are the Timberwolves taking number 1?" And I said, "They're gonna take Anthony Edwards." And he's like, "Oh, who's that?" I'm like, "He's basically like a shorter, thicker Andrew Wiggins," which is what I said, just because. Yeah. Like you said, he's got a high ceiling, but you could also see the floor, which if things don't pan out, he ends up being a guy who, like Dion Waiters, shoots, too many shots, even though he's not super efficient, then that's more of like an Andrew Wiggins type of vibe.
Yep. And that's where that's just where I see Edwards. Like I can see, like you can watch some of him, you can hear like people talk about him, and I can see the conversation. Like I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I just
don't believe it.
I don't buy it.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Cool.
All right, so let's round up that top 5. Who's next?
Number 5, this is where I think the draft starts to get really interesting.
Yeah, yep. I'm also interested to see because there's some guys not down here, some guys overseas, some sleeper guys. Obviously, we got Tyler Hero late in the lottery, so I think now from like 5 to 15 is where it gets interesting.
Yeah. So I think everybody thinks there's a consensus top 3 and then there's a drop off. For me, I'm relatively similar. I just kind of flip Okongwu and Edwards because I do really, really like Okongwu. So here's kind of where everybody starts to be like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. And Cleveland especially is interesting because what the heck are they doing? They've got every point guard in the world. They've got every big man in the world, but none of them are that good. And like, where are they going?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about them, and this is where I think they're going to end up going, is getting the kid from Israel, Deni Avdija.
I like that. I like that for them.
Yeah, I think that Deni Avdija is Nick Batum without like the elite one-on-one defense. That's where like he's a good team defender. He's not a bad defender, but like prime Nick Batum was like you could put him on LeBron for like 25 minutes a game and like do his best, like as much as anybody could against the best player in the world.
Right.
But like you could do that. I don't think you're ever gonna get that far with Deni. But in his prime, Batum was like an elite ISO level defender. And I don't know if he'll ever get there, like I said, but he's like a secondary shot creator, pretty decent shooter, likes to have the ball in his hands, is a big guy. He's like 6'9", I think, like around that range, plays like a point forward kind of guy, and just has like a crafty, just like pretty good offensive game. He's a good passer, good but not great shooter. And I just think that he's like a glue guy that I think will fit right in the middle of all of Cleveland's pieces.
Yeah, so I guess the question I got here, we've seen from guys overseas, we've seen a spectrum from the Dragon Bender types who we think are going to be Kristaps to the Kristaps types who are unicorns, and obviously the Luka Doncic types who end up being guys that we think are going to potential.
Just to clear that up, this guy is not Luka.
Yes,
he was never.
So
Luka.
I guess that's how I ask is, how do we evaluate like this talent overseas? How do we not just talk ourselves into a Darko Milicic type of guy where this guy might end up being Darko, or we just don't know much about him?
So we just don't. We don't know. There's a lot, and especially for a guy like him, because he played his last couple, he played in a Euro ball, like in the Euro League for a little while, like when he was like about a year ago. So we do have some. Film and like, statistical markers and everything from like high level Euroball. But his most recent, like in the summer, he was playing basketball in Israel. And that's kind of where he's like grew up a little bit and whatnot. And that's probably the worst pro league that there is. Especially if you look at the fact
Didn't he play in the Israeli league and like the Euro league?
Yeah, he played in both. But his most recent, like in like as recently as like July, like with the pandemic going on, like Israel figured it out, I guess, and they're a smaller country, so they play basketball, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's like the worst league of all of them, like high level, like ESPN guys and like the statistical model guys, like they say that like the Euro League, the Israeli league is worse than college basketball. Like it's like that bad, especially if you look at the fact that there's one elite team, Maccabi Tel Aviv, and that's where Deni played.
Yeah.
So play against a good team.
Uh-huh.
It's like Gonzaga. Like, they play all the West Coast teams and the only good team is them.
Right.
So like, that's like the thing where we don't know. So you just kind of have to do your best at just looking at him on the court and just looking at what he does and seeing if like the skill set translates when you put better players around him in both ends. He's going to have better players around him, so he won't get double teamed as much.
Yeah.
He also won't be going against, B-level Israeli defenders. He'll be going against, Anthony Edwards on the other side.
Yeah. I think he's a pretty good playmaker as well, and he's obviously a bigger guy. So he's like 6'7" no, he's 6'9". He's 6'9". But he's not a great shooter yet, but I think he does have potential for that. So I think a player comp, is actually Evan Turner. Evan Turner was a bigger guy, handled the ball a lot when we saw him on those Boston teams. Not a great shooter, but but Evan Turner is also really thick. But this guy's a little skinnier, but he's young, so we'll see. All right, do we want to run through the next 5 and then we just maybe pick what are the most interesting picks out of those, Eli? So why don't you give us in order?
We can go quickly. So the next 5, I think Atlanta's interesting. They want to trade down apparently. They want to trade out of this pick and get a NBA ready guy. They want to push for that 8 seed. Because they want an NBA ready guy, I think Tyrese Halliburton makes a lot of sense. So I think that he's going to fit right next to Trae Young. Detroit, I think, wants a high upside point guard.
For sure.
I think Killian Hayes is probably
the best player. I like that
player.
for them too.
Probably the best player left on the board, at least in my book as well. And he fits the need. The Knicks, I think, are extremely disappointed right now because I think they want Halliburton where he is because they need a point guard. And I think there's a lot of rumblings as recently as today. I think it was KOC, maybe it was someone else, I forget, who said that if Obi Toppin is still on the board, they're going to take Obi Toppin.
Is that a little high for him? Has he been? I think in mocks he's been going a little lower. No.
No, I think that's pretty standard for where he's going.
Yeah, I've seen him go to you're talking about the Knicks.
Cleveland apparently really, really likes him too. Nothing we know are smoke screens or not, whatever. But if you tell me tomorrow, what the draft starts at 8, 8:30, Cleveland's on the board, and they pick Toppin, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go somewhere in the 5 to 11-ish range. So right in the middle there where the Knicks go. So I think that one, I don't personally see that one, but I kind of understand where people are coming from. Washington, I have at 9 going Patrick Williams, who's everybody's biggest riser right now. He is the one.
He's been going pretty high on some mocks. I've seen top 6 before.
I don't understand when this guy. I'm looking at the ringers right now. He's 6. And they have his averages. He averaged 9 points and 1 assist.
He came off the bench. He didn't even start.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think we've seen guys like this before. I'm thinking of Zach Collins in Portland. He was a freshman guy. Wasn't expected to.
Williams is a freshman as well.
Wasn't expected to be one and done. Yeah, Devin Booker too. Obviously was a guy off the bench. So.
Yeah, so Patrick Williams I think is really interesting, and I think the biggest reason why he's starting to rise is he fits the prototype of a player that is the most valuable in the NBA right now. These really big, athletic, defensive wings that can also create their own shot. If you could squint really hard and say what Patrick Williams' ceiling is, and it looks like this massive Kawhi Leonard type player. I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
A weak draft and he's still going 9, so you have to squint really hard.
Yeah.
Kawhi also went 15 for a reason, right? Part of that was medical, but that's a different story. That's what his mold is. And it's not necessarily that I think he is worth the top 10 pick right now, him, the player, but what he could be, the mold of what he is this elite level wing that just does everything on the basketball court. And even if he never ends up Kawhi, my comp for him was a Paul Millsap, PJ Tucker kind of guy.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense because at the very least with those guys, I mean, we've seen you mentioned Kawhi before. That's maybe the absolute best ceiling, but at the very least, he's got a great frame. He can play defense.
Yeah, I think PJ Tucker is what he'll be if he doesn't really hit his offensive ceiling, and Millsap is what he is if he does hit the offensive ceiling. Pretty good standstill jump shooter. He's not elite or anything, but I think you hit 30, in his mid-30s. He's a good jump shooter. So worst case, I do see the PJ Tucker kind of comp where he's just a bulldog defensive guy and he just hits some threes from the corner. But I think if he hits his ceiling, then he kind of turns into this more he can create off the elbow kind of dribble handoff kind of things, and he looks a little bit like Paul Millsap and the latter Atlanta, early Denver kind of days. So I think
Nice.
Patrick Williams is extremely interesting.
And then number 10, rounding out our top 10, Eli.
Number 10, I have the Suns, who didn't give up this pick somehow. And I think the reason they didn't is because they want a defensive wing. And I think Isaac Okoro from Alabama, from Auburn, sorry.
Auburn.
Makes the most sense. Yeah, he's from Auburn. And this one, I want to tell you my comp for him. And I want to see if you guys can guess this one, actually, because it's near and dear to our hearts. But I basically said he's an elite defensive wing from day one, tons of potential as a secondary playmaker and a very smart player. Major question with his jump shot and overall offensive game. If he becomes a knockdown shooter, his ceiling is through the roof. That's a big if.
That sounds like another guy that went number 10 to our favorite team, the Miami Heat. Alex, you know who it is?
Oh, Justice.
Justice.
Oh, I like. That's. That's pretty dope. I mean, that's enough. They've been trying to stash a lot of these like 3-and-D wing players. Like they have Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges. He's gonna fit in there too.
So that's where I think Isaac Okoro is gonna make his mark in the NBA. He's from day one. Like if there was one player that like in this like age range, even let's call even like the first year, like the second year guys now. Like if there's probably one player where I'm just like, hey, go out and guard like the elite wings in the NBA right now. Like I don't think there's anybody I would rather take than Okoro.
Wow.
He is legitimately that good defense.
That's awesome.
He just doesn't really have much of an offensive game right now, especially his jumper. But you can see he's relatively creative with the ball. He's not like a stiff. He's a pretty decent ball handler. He's a pretty good passer. He didn't average a lot of assists, but Auburn, he wasn't like their point guard or anything like that. So he'll never be like a major assist guy or anything. But like as a guy that just can create like secondarily off the ball, like I think he can do that. It's just a matter of now, can he hit that jump shot? And I think if he can work in Phoenix, he doesn't have to score right away. They've got Ayton, they've got Booker, they've got Paul. I think Okoro makes a lot of sense as like a guy that just comes in, guards the good guys that Devin Booker can't, and then hope he develops a jumper.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, good luck for them.
So why don't you run through your top 10 from the top to bottom with the teams and the players. Let's see what you got.
I'll do teams, players, and I realized I didn't give a player comp for a couple of them. So just a quick thing on that too. So I have Minnesota going LaMelo, who I said is kind of a Sean Livingston, Spencer Dinwiddie kind of guy, but with higher upside. Golden State, James Wiseman. He's DeAndre Jordan with the potential for a face-up game. Onyeka Okongwu, who's a little bit taller, Brandon Clark. Chicago going Anthony Edwards, who I said is a Deion Waiters level chucker, who I don't really like, but I see the Oladipo ceiling. Cleveland going Denny Avdia, Nick Batum without the elite defense. With elite one-on-one defense, he's a good team defender. Tyrese Halliburton, probably my favorite player. Just if you were to say who's your favorite player in this draft, it's Halliburton. I wish we could have talked about him a little bit. But KOC compared him to SGA, which also makes sense because I loved SGA coming out. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's just like a lanky point guard, like 1-2 combo hybrid. And I think that's Tyrese Halliburton. Fits really well next to Trae Young. Detroit, Killian Hayes from France. He's like a Manu D'Lo, crafty lefty, scoring point guard with some playmaking. Yep. Exactly. Knicks, Obi Toppin from Dayton. Everybody says Amari Stoudemire. That's the big comp that everybody likes. He's an unbelievable offensive player. I just wonder if he'll ever get good on defense. He's extremely stiff. He's extremely stiff and has like really upright like hips. So we'll see. Patrick Williams. I said Paul Millsap, PJ Tucker. And then Isaac Okoro, who I said Justice Winslow, out of Auburn, going to the Suns.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Great. Well, guys. I mean, you don't even have to watch the draft. That's basically what's going to be happening. The top 10 picks. So turn it on maybe at 9. What is it? 9 p.m. by the time we're at number 11. Cool. Okay. So we're all Heat fans here. This is a Miami Heat podcast. We love to say who are some of the players that Eli you want us to take at pick number 20, or what do you even think? Do you think we're going to keep the pick? Because once again, this draft isn't that great. But the Miami Heat we've been known to be able to find talent late in drafts. We had Josh Richardson, pick 33, and of course Bam and Hero was a 40-40, my bad. And then Bam and Hero in the middle of the first round, and so we're pretty good at finding talent. So what do you think we're gonna do at number 20?
Don't forget my boy Mario Chalmers back in the day.
Yeah.
So I don't think the Heat are picking at 20 at all. I don't think that.
Oh, wow.
I don't think that there's any chance the Heat pick at 20. I think they either I don't think they're going to make a big trade at this point, but an Oladipo type kind of trade, maybe. I don't really see it, but maybe.
Mhm.
But I think what's more likely to happen, and I think there's a lot of rumblings of this, is the Heat trading down and trying to pick up 2 picks in this range. Because with this draft is not top heavy at all. We just talked about how I have only one guy in the top 2 tiers. Even I think that's kind of the consensus. But from like 15 to 30, there's some decent role player type players. That's exactly what Miami needs right now.
Yeah.
We need like the big fish, the Giannis that we might hopefully get, and they just need guys that'll fill in the ends of the benches where guys like EJJ and Myers Leonard and Jay Crowder might be leaving soon and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think a trade, something like going back to like pick 26 and picking up like pick 43. I don't know who those teams are off the top of my head, but something like that, I think makes the most sense for Miami. And a couple names that I think the Heat should be looking at are, if we stay at 20, because I don't even think he's going to fall to 20. These are the 2 guys that I think that we would most want, but I don't think are going to be there, but maybe could be, are Tyrese Maxey, another Kentucky kid.
That'd be fall. He'd definitely fall to get to 20.
Yeah, I don't think he would, but he shot 29% from 3 this year, which is not great, and only 32 on jumpers in general. But he came in with the reputation of a knockdown shooter, so maybe a fluky year, a year where
we can develop him especially if we trade Kendrick Nunn.
He's not the primary guy too.
Exactly.
Ball handler on there, so I don't know. But he's a bulldog defensive player. He's really good at the point of attack, which is what the Heat need more than anything. And he's just a good scorer. So I think Maxey is a great pick. And then the other one would be Jalen Smith, the big man from Maryland.
All right, so why a big man when we have Bam?
So we need somebody to play next to Bam or behind Bam. We need somebody in that Myers.
We need someone to guard Anthony Davis, John. You didn't watch the finals, dude? I mean.
Hey, Bam was injured. That's for another episode, though.
Hold on. Bring me on and we'll talk all day about that. So Jalen Smith, I think if I had to pick one guy where I was like, this guy would be perfect, it's Jalen Smith. He's 6'10" with a 7'1" wingspan. He blocks 2.4 shots per game in the ACC, which is obviously one of the better conferences in basketball.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And he shot 37% from 3.
Ooh, okay, sign me up.
And he legitimately, it wasn't a standstill. They were running like screens and like pin downs for him. Like
I got this here. It's on 87 3-point attempts. So
yeah,
it's pretty high enough sample size.
That's like 3. It's almost 3 a game. Colleges play about 30 games a year.
Yeah.
If we didn't get the NCAA tournament, whatever. So around 30 games, like that's 3 threes a game, and he's like 1 for 3 from 3 every game, basically.
That's awesome. 3 and D center next to Bam.
Exactly.
Perfect.
That's exactly why I think he's the perfect guy for the Heat. Is like he'll come in, he'll bang down low, he'll help out, he'll be a good help defender when Bam's guarding the perimeter somewhere. He'll block some shots, and on offense, he can hit some threes and space the floor because we know Bam isn't the greatest shooter in the world yet. So I think Jalen Smith is perfect. However, I think he's going to go in like the 13 to 18 range. Here's what I keep seeing him mocked, which I think makes a lot of sense, is kind of similar to Miami, New Orleans at 13, right next to Zion, who like not exactly similar to Bam, but like the smaller center.
Yeah.
Like you squint a little bit and it makes a little bit of sense. So you put Jalen Smith next to him, it makes sense.
Yeah, that could work. Well, so let me throw a trade out at you guys for that pick. This is what I saw on 5 Reasons Sports. Brady Hawk said he thinks we're trading down as well, and the trade would have been, or this is what his trade is, because we've been linked to Danilo Gallinari, who's a free agent, but I think it would have to be a sign and trade, or we'd have to move some of our contracts maybe. So the trade is Kendrick Nunn, Kelly Olynyk, the 20th pick, and then we get Danilo Gallinari and the 53rd pick, which is a late second-round pick. So Miami can still pick someone late in the draft, and we get Danilo Gallinari, who we've wanted for a while now.
So if I'm Miami, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll do that because, like, you just punt the draft. 53 is too low, especially in a draft like this. Like that, you're not doing it to get the 53rd pick. You're just going to say, hey, maybe we develop him like a Josh Richardson-like player.
Yeah.
But they have a billion picks. So if you could somehow squeeze one of their, like, I think they have a high second rounder, like in like the 35, 38 range, maybe, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. That would kind of be my ideal. You move back and you get one of those picks. So that one would make sense.
Yeah, I
but
like
at the end
that.
of the day, if you're getting Danilo Gallinari, take 20, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because that would be a great fit, especially because we just talked about having Jalen Smith, who's a guy who could spread the floor next to Bam. Danilo Gallinari is not a great defender, but he is a big man who can stretch the floor, and he's probably similar to Kelly Olynyk, but maybe better. He's probably a better version of Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah, he's much better. And even defensively, like he's not a horrible defender.
Yeah.
Gallinari, like he's not like an unbelievable ISO like one-on-one defender, but he's a good team defender.
Yeah, he's not a minus.
Big, he's relatively athletic. He's switchy. Like you can run a lot of what we did with Jay Crowder. Like you just switch them out. You can run them pretty similarly, with the exception of like the one-on-one like ISO.
Yeah.
Like the system won't change much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just won't place him on, the Giannis's.
On Giannis. He's not guarding Giannis, exactly.
Yeah, so like the system won't change much.
Okay, well then why don't we that could be a good segue. John and Eli, I want to ask you both. John, who do you think the Miami Heat should target in free agency this summer? Or this summer, what am I talking about? This offseason that's gonna last a month.
Yeah, so honestly, I think this is kind of like the unpopular opinion on Heat Twitter, but I don't want to switch things around too much. The number one guy I'm after is Serge Ibaka, because that is a comparison that I just saw for Jalen Smith. So honestly, I'd be down to keep that
That's
number.
exactly who I have for Jalen Smith.
Yeah, that number 20 pick. If we can keep, if he's a younger Serge Ibaka, I'm down for that for our Heat development. That's great. He's going to be cheaper too. If we can get Serge, though, obviously big defensive, shot blocking guy who can also just develop a 3-point shot. So he can also hit the three. So I'm down for Serge Ibaka, but I don't want to do anything too drastic. Obviously, I want to re-sign Dragic for 1 year, a $20 million year, one big year, but that also doesn't, ruin our shot at Giannis in 2021. So I don't want to do anything too crazy, but I think Serge Ibaka would be nice in that Myers-Leonard role.
Yeah, I like that. I like that for sure. So Serge, anyone else? Eli, do you have any other free agency targets that you've been calling up Pat Riley and saying, Riley, go after this dude?
Absolutely. I think that there's a couple. So I'm with John for the most part in terms of like not blowing things up. I want Dragic back. In an ideal world, I'd want Jay Crowder back, unless we kind of sign a replacement if he wants too much money. So I kind of want just like periphery guys. And the three big names that have been linked to the Heat, and I like all three of them, are Danilo Gallinari. Well, Serge Ibaka also, so the four, I guess. I just don't think Serge is going to end up signing because the only way we're going to get Serge is we sign him in the mid-level exception.
Yeah, there's no way he's taking that little money, right?
I don't think he's going to come and take 9.3 to be a backup big on the Miami Heat. I just don't. But I might be wrong, so hopefully I'm wrong. But Danilo Gallinari in a sign and trade, where we give up Kendrick Nunn, Kelly Olynyk, and then whatever draft pick compensation they feel is inadequate. And then the other two guys, and I think they both make a lot of sense, are Paul Millsap and Wes Matthews. I think they both make a lot of sense as versatile defensive pieces that can come in and, like I said, like play the Jay Crowder-ish type role. Where Crowder is more of a 3 and Millsap is more of a 4 and Matthews is more of a 2.
Yeah, those are
up and down a little bit, but like defensive guys that can help, especially Matthews. I think if we can get Wesley Matthews, that would be huge. I think Wesley Matthews solves a lot of our problems. Miami Heat really need a point of attack defender, a guy that can just guard these point guards.
Yeah.
Like
the Kembas and the Kyries. We're going to have to go through one of those two teams probably.
Those guys, guard the guys that come off screens a lot. Like Wes Matthews was hounding Duncan Robinson the entire series when he wasn't guarding Jimmy straight up, which he was also doing a great job guarding Jimmy. Jimmy was torching everybody, but not Wes Matthews. Look at the numbers in that series. He was very bad against Wes Matthews and the best player in the world basically against everybody else. So, you give me a guy like that, and then at the end of the day, Wes Matthews is like a 36, 37%.
Yeah, he'll still knock it down.
Yeah. Okay, I like Matthews. One thing I want to say about Paul Millsap. So he's coming off of a 3-year, $90 million deal. So yeah, if you do the math, it's about $30 million a year. He signed out with Denver 3 seasons ago when he was 32. Now he's 34. Are we sure that Indiana or Orlando or Chicago isn't going to pay $20 million for Paul Millsap?
No,
I'm not going to pay him.
I think people are very low on him. People are low on Millsap.
So I think you're much higher on Millsap's earning potential than I think the NBA is.
Okay.
And I think part of the reason for that is, and I think Millsap has said similar to this without like totally saying that he doesn't care about money, but like it's kind of exactly what you just said. I thought you were going with this is realistic because he just came off $100 million basically contract.
Okay.
And if you're like 35, if you were to say, hey, Paul, instead of taking $10 million to go play in Charlotte, take 5 and come play in Miami, you're already a bajillionaire. Come play basketball. You're a Heat culture type player. You know, he's a hard worker, defense first guy. And I think that would be.
Yeah, I would love to see him play.
So you sold me. I'll say you said that I think that his earning potential in the NBA is higher than realistic. I think you guys are also underestimating how dumb some GMs are. I'm glad to know.
About the GMs, because like I said, I think it might just be Paul saying like, do I want 10, 12 from Charlotte, or you know, maybe I can milk the whole mid-level out of Miami. That's 9.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think anyone's offering him more than 15.
Yeah, no way.
Okay, 15 and 9, like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on board.
I like that. All right. Well,
the only other last kind of thing is like a defensive point guard. If we don't get like one of those Wes Matthews kind of guys. So I've heard guys like Gary Payton Jr., who's like just a really good defender.
I heard about it.
Yeah. DeAnthony Melton, he's probably too good. Like, I don't think we're going to be able to sign him for the money that he's going to want to make. But some guys like that, I think make a little bit. Chris Dunn, who just the Bulls renounced his rights. I think it was today or yesterday.
Yeah.
So a Chris Dunn kind of guy. If we can get him for like $5-6 million, like the mid-level by mid-level, I think that those kind of guys would make some sense as fillers as well. Especially if we end up getting Gallo, because he might be a little more expensive. You know, then signing like those guys like a $3-4 million deal makes sense.
Great. I'm excited. I'm excited for Pat Riley to see him. And our team is still so hungry. And I think the best like recruitment pitch for any of these guys, no matter how good, if they're Giannis or even just like a Millsap type, like a veteran guy that we want to just add to our mix. I think it was the best pitch what we just did in the playoffs, and everyone knows about Heat culture now. You know, before in the down years, it was like people forgot about it, people didn't know. But now I think things are looking up, and I'm excited to see what Pat Riley's going to be able to do this summer.
Exactly. Can I give one more draft guy actually? Just only because I think if I had to put money on who I think is going to end up in Miami at the end of this, and I was going to get to him, I think we're hearing a lot of buzz, and your Miami friends might like this one especially.
Okay.
Is Vernon Carey Jr.
I have
Alex
seen
and
that.
I
we played against him.
Well, we didn't play. We sat on the bench while our team played against him.
So just super quick on him. So for those that don't know him, he's a Duke big man. The reason I said the Miami guys, his dad played right tackle for the Dolphins for like 7-8 seasons in like the early 2000s.
And he's from South Florida, I think, or South Florida. Yeah, from South Florida.
So the Heat, I don't like him. I'm gonna be honest right now. If the Heat pick him, I will not be happy.
Yeah.
Unless we like trade down, like you said, to like 40 something, and he's there, maybe sure. I don't like him that much. He's a throwback big. He's like a post guy, like, you know, doesn't shoot a lot. He shot 38% from 3, but at 21 attempts, so less than one a game.
That's nothing.
And he shot 67% from the free throw line, which is like a future marker that, like, you know, marks how good you're going to be a three-point shooter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like him, but the Heat have been talking about him a lot. And the thing about him that doesn't intrigue me, though, is he's apparently lost 30 pounds during the hiatus. And that's what he was. He was like this big 6'10", like low block bruiser. I kind of compared him like a late career, like Al Jefferson kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Not when he was like 28, like 20 and 12, whatever, on like Indiana those couple of years, like a little bit later on. Like that's kind of what I see him as. But Miami apparently loves him. So that's the one where like we keep hearing, like that's why the Heat want to trade down, is to get a guy like him. And the final thing on him is ESPN's Kevin Pelton, which has like his like statistical model. They have him at 14, which is.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was going to say, with Vernon Carey coming out of high school, he was one of the top prospects, I remember. And I do remember seeing
everything. He was ACC rookie at freshman.
Yeah. And
player on Duke, which is a top 10 program. He just doesn't fit the modern NBA, which is why I don't like him.
Yeah.
It's this 30 pounds, and the Heat have seen something more from him. And he did shoot 38%, so his form looks nice. It just never goes in.
Yeah.
Like, if you're the Heat development team and there's just something about him that
we can do something with this kid.
I don't see. Listen, I'm done. I didn't like Tyler Hero. I didn't like Bam. I'm over it.
Yeah.
Well, then, you know, we should hope they take Vernon Carey.
Maybe the key of the Heat is going against me.
Yeah. Just call up Eli. Eli, who do you not want us to take? And then they just take.
The guy that I wanted more than anything last year was PJ Washington. And that also, he's not Tyler Hero, but he's a great player.
Yeah, he's good.
I wanted in the Bam year was Donovan Mitchell, and that was clearly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm kind of right and kind of wrong. But.
Oh, it's so funny. All right. Well, before we wrap up, we want to touch on some fantasy corner right quick. We're all three of us in a league with all of our camp friends. It's a 14-man league. There's actually more people in the league. Some people have doubled up. And last year, I hate to say it, Eli Mallouhi, you were the champion, even though all season long we told you that Jameis Winston as your quarterback was never going to work. Somehow it worked. And this year, you're atop the league. You just beat me last week. I didn't have Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is on his bye week, and now you're 8-2.
Beat you by like 30 for the record.
I mean, it was a rough week for me. Dalvin didn't cook as he should have. Hashtag let Dalvin cook. But I'm number 5. My record's 5-5. And John, what are you now? Are you 10?
So shockingly, yeah, I'm at spot 10, but I'm 5-5. Just shockingly,
Wow.
I've done this despite my first 3 picks being Christian McCaffrey, who's played 3 games, Leonard Fournette, who was supposed to be the number 1 running back for the Jags, and Amari Cooper, who has been garbage since Dak Prescott got hurt. So he's been all right. Shocking that I'm even 5-5, and I'm at spot 10 though because my points 4 is like the lowest in the league.
I'm sitting at 5, and I should be. I mean, I think Eli. I think I've scored a few less points than you, maybe. But
yeah,
I'm
you're
at
at
5.
you're at 4th.
You guys want to worry about the points. I'll worry about the wins. That's what
All
everybody.
right.
Our group chat is always exploding. I score more points than you. Blah blah blah. I'm 8-2. You guys can fight for whoever scores the most points wins.
Good. You get your easy schedule then, Eli. You play me when Pat Mahomes is on the bench. Come on.
I won by I won by 36 points if I did that math correctly.
Pat Mahomes is putting up 40 burgers.
Yeah, and even if he did, you still had a quarterback that scored 11. So that only the difference there is still 20 something.
Man, Jared Goff. Eli, this has been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe it took us this long to have you on the pod, but I'm looking forward to many more of these. We're definitely having you at the very least, we know in a year before, or not even a year, and however many months we are away from the next draft, we're definitely having you on that one as our double take draft expert. But thank you, guys. This has been a blast, bro.
Let me know whenever, guys. Would love to join whenever. So, let me know, and thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. It's been a pleasure as always. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a good one. As always, go Heat.
Go Heat, baby.